Oh, hello there. You're probably wondering why I'm sitting here, dressed so nicely and sipping this lovely grape juice. Well, you see, according to my yearly recap for 2023, my most listened to type or mood of music was reflective, aka pensive, forward-thinking, introspective, all of which is kind of represented in my number 50 pick. I fucking adore this song. Jeff Rosenstock looked at all of the weight of the world that we all pile on top of each other, carry on our backs, and let ourselves get weighed down by day after day. I mean, come on, we can all relate to that. And answered, who fucking cares? At a certain point, it just becomes too much for one person to carry. And so, why even bother? Just throw up your hands, give up, and admit that the future is dumb. Maybe we don't even have one. Who cares if you die? Who cares if you don't die? The world doesn't own you. Why do you let the weight of the world affect you so much in your day-to-day? Now, to be clear, Jeff Rosenstock is very smart, and across the entirety of Hell Mode, he makes it very clear that he thinks way too much, but this was definitely the therapeutic catharsis that I think we were all looking for. And considering that on the bridge he himself gets near manic with that mantra, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that part of this at least is in jest. Either way, with some of the most killer guitars of the year, it's an absolute banging way to kick off this list. So yeah, welcome to the top 50 songs of 2023, I guess. The only rule that I want to mention up top is I'm limiting it to 3 songs per artist. Kind of, you'll see what I mean if you haven't guessed it already. And that if you haven't checked out part 1 of this top 100 songs of 2023, you can find it over on the channel. It's a very easy video to watch, a loose collection of songs that were originally supposed to be a little bit more thought out and scripted, but life happens. But anyway, you ever just want to be really bitter against someone who was really shitty to you?
I just came out of spite. I didn't come here to try to put things right.
Billy No Mates is by far one of the best singers to come out over the last couple of years. Someone whose vocals I've likened more than once to those of Stevie Nicks. And while her own fanbase is extremely rabid and passionate, I'm waiting for her to get that big break that really pushes her over the top. She's building a momentum and she's going to explode. And despite some absolute assholes who attended her concert and were really shitty to her for no reason, it seems like she agrees and is not gonna let them weigh her down. Because amid all the people who doubted her, all the people who pushed her back, she is going to ignore all of it and still show up and give her best, even if it's purely out of spite. I absolutely love that attitude, and for me at least, watching her perform this live, she actually closed with it, it was awesome. It's her best song to date. Fucking fantastic.
You said don't ever eat the acid if you don't want to be changed like it changed me.
On the other hand, sometimes you just want to stare into the void until it stares back at you, which is pretty much how I think Eat the Acid was conceived. An absolutely nightmarish track that is easily one of Kesha's most experimental and also her most daring. Now, for context, Kesha herself has reportedly never done acid, but she has been told many times that if she did do it, she wouldn't be able to unsee what she would end up seeing. And that's how this entire song is constructed. Basically a warning to all those who think that they're ready to dive into that darkness, because that darkness may just swallow you up whole. And she gives it the fitting instrumentation, the haunting backing vocals, the creepy synths, and the weird mind-bending vocal production to really back all of it up. It's easily one of her best songs to date, and as a fan of her, not something I was expecting, but definitely something I was delighted to get. So far we've had a lot of running away or avoiding emotional collapses. What if we just faced it head on?
'Cause I really wanna know, will anybody ever love me?
Like many critics, I was kind of floored by Sufjan Stevens' Javelin. An album that, personally, I don't always find the easiest to revisit, but that's because it's so emotionally powerful, easily his most devastating album since Carrion Lowell. And despite it taking a little bit of time to grow on me, this eventually became the easy highlight. A song where Sufjan Stevens asks that question that we all have at some point: will anybody ever love me? It's that feeling of loneliness and emptiness that we've all felt at some point before. But then you remember that this album was written in tribute and in the wake of his partner dying, which really does give that question a whole load of extra emotional weight. It's not just the fact that you've lost a love and you're not sure you're going to be able to recapture it with anyone else, but that you know that you found the one. And how can you possibly replace that? It's easily one of the most emotional songs of the year. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. And with the absolutely gorgeous arrangements that enter and ebb in and out all across this thing, it's really a kaleidoscope of beauty and grief. Yeah, it's no wonder that this was the song that really did stick with me in the long run. God damn it, Sufjan. I really, really hope it gets easier. So, still feeling slightly chipper? Allow me to fix that. Amanda Fields is a name that you might not immediately recognize unless you've been following this channel closely this year, but you all need to fix that because she has become a huge contender as one of the best new artists working in country music. A stellar performer with vocals that honestly do remind me of Patsy Cline, she burst onto the scene with a backwards-looking album about a very modern and contemporary problem, divorce. And this song is the emotional crux of that, the song where she realizes that diamonds aren't forever, and promises sometimes don't mean a fucking thing. And I think that's really why the emotional performance on this hits me so hard, not only because Amanda herself sounds incredibly sweet and vulnerable, but because she makes it very clear she was completely blindsided by this. Sure, there might have been a couple of warning signs, but she didn't think it was going to end this way. And with the gorgeous strings, the pedal steel, and the slow piano, all perfectly framed to not overwhelm her grief-filled voice, it's one of the most stunning performances of the year. And I'm honestly shocked it's this low on the list. Now that might be because one other particular song on the album grew on me even more, but that's still not discounting this as one of the pinnacles of its genre.
What's this? The consequences of my actions now.
Lovejoy has been a very polarizing band this year, surprisingly so. Not so much to their own fans, we love them, but in general they've received a little bit of criticism for not being particularly forward-thinking, where their influences are incredibly obvious. And yeah, you could argue they're not bringing anything fundamentally new to the genre, but they do the genre so fucking well, and I honestly would argue they bring their own flair purely in the songwriting, that I would still argue that their EP earlier this year was one of the best projects to come out in 2023. And this was a song that really did grow on me purely for that fucking chorus. It's a very tongue-in-cheek song where the protagonist realizes that, surprise, there are consequences for your shitty behavior, as it all comes back to bite him and he seems nonplussed that this could have possibly happened. It's a very funny song, but it also doesn't forget to add some killer guitar licks, an absolutely fantastic hook, and absurd lyrics like "Drink, I've had too much to think" that really did cement it as one of my favorite rock songs of this year. Hell, it was memed to hell and back within this household. Not the only song to have that honor actually, but we'll get to that a bit later. Okay, that was fun. Time to get serious again.
'Cause I'm a woman, I'm a very fucking brave, strong woman, and I'll be damned if I let a man ruin.
So as many of you know, Ray for a long time was locked into this really toxic contract with her previous label, who actually did everything they could to sabotage her solo release after she left them. But despite all that, she cut through the noise and even made a major impact over in the States, with her Messy by Design album really striking a chord with a lot of listeners, both old and new, because she really did lay it all bare. And this was the song that did it the most. The track where she very emphatically sketches out something that actually happened to her, where she showed up to a studio and this producer essentially sexually harassed her, making her feel so small and less than, and yet she proudly spits back in his face that she's a woman. She's a very fucking brave, strong woman, in one of the most emotionally raw tones of voice that I've ever heard put to record. It's impossible to fake. Because yeah, this happens. There's a lot of abuse within the industry, especially behind the scenes. And she's not afraid to put this pathetic fucking excuse for a man on blast. Again, it's just one of the rawest songs that Ray's ever put out, and for me at least, it vaulted it to the very top of that album. Don't get me wrong, she had another song on this list, and I love escapism, but for me at least, yeah, this is peak. Quick side note, have you seen these? I got them for Christmas, I don't know if you can see them. They're fucking Stitch socks. Please don't put this on WikiFeed. I just really want to make it clear, I fucking love Lilo and Stitch, and I'm so delighted that I got these socks. Anyway, speaking of cute stuff.
Bunny is a rider, satellite can find her, no sympathy.
Caroline Polachek is absolutely one of the most talented people currently working in music. A forward-thinking, experimental, and absolutely stunningly gifted vocalist, who this year made yet another album that was critically acclaimed across the board. And while personally, I still think it wasn't quite as consistent as Pang, the highs on it were even more plentiful and in some cases on a whole other level. And even though this song has technically been out for a couple of years now, it was on the album, so I'm counting it. A playful, multifaceted pop song that almost seems to dance around your speakers, where the music video very much encapsulates that feeling of trying to catch that white rabbit that's constantly darting in and out of sight, where it's really impossible to predict where they're going to go next. Once again, kind of the perfect analogy for Caroline herself in her musical career, and I was just so charmed by it. Easily one of the best constructed pop songs that I've heard in years. And while it did take me a while to admit that there was another song on the album that was even better than this is still one of the best things she's ever done, and that's saying a lot. Also, side note, did anyone else have no idea she was the lead singer of Chairlift? Crying in Public is legitimately one of my favorite songs of all time. I have no idea how I didn't realize this before this year.
But he's proud of his minor imperfections.
So this was actually the final song to make this list, purely because I was extremely late to checking out Charles Wesley Godwin's album, and it's well worth a listen. You definitely should check it out, especially if you're a fan of, say, Zach Bryan. But it is one of those albums that is such an easy listen from start to finish that it took a while for a single song to jump out at me as the favorite. But ultimately, I think I made the right choice here. Minor Imperfections is a song about an old retired miner essentially living his best life, where he's not perfect, he's definitely got back pain for days, but that's because he's worked a hard life of labor, one that he wants to be proud of and also make his wife and kids proud of. And it shows that it's paid off because the song is mostly from the point of view of his son, looking up to his daddy who, sure, works a lot of hours and isn't always there, but at the end of the day, he's just a good guy who's doing everything he can to provide for his family. And what's wrong with that? Especially where in the final verse it shows that Charles Wesley Godwin is following in his father's footsteps, growing up to become a blue-collar worker himself in order to provide the same inspiration to his own kids. It's a traditional song, but the instrumentation is just so fucking beautiful, and the chorus just hits like the best song the Turnpike Troubadours never made, that this just absolutely blew past all of my critical defenses. It's a terrific and sweet little song. Check it out if you haven't. Also, he made a cover of Country Roads that I genuinely would rather listen to than the original, primarily because, have you sung that at karaoke recently? It's so fucking long, it takes forever to get going. And speaking of songs about being proud of where you came from,
We were rowing too fast, doing anything just to not be in your minds.
yeah, this kind of snuck up on me. Apparently it was actually my 5th most played song of the entire year. But yeah, for me at least, this is one of the best hooks that Kojak has ever had. A Dublin rapper whose praises I've been shouting from the rooftops since 2021, Kojak is just one of those incredibly gifted MCs with a phenomenal ear for production, who just has a knack of painting these phenomenal character portraits of people that you've definitely met in real life if you've lived in Dublin. In this case, I'm pretty sure it's a snapshot from his own childhood, as a kid growing up in Cabra who would get into trouble, mess around with the lads, doing everything he could not to have to go home to his mum. And it's rough. You get chased by police, you get into trouble for being a vandal because that's what all your friends are doing. In his own words, it's hard not to get hardened by that lifestyle. And yet he makes it so vividly cathartic, the lines are so fucking plentiful in how quotable they are, and the chorus just never leaves my head, it's just in there rent-free at all times, that it really did stick with me more than any other song on the album. To be clear, I do think it's a project that works better as a whole than in those isolated moments, but when you're this fucking talented at just building a catchy as hell song, who am I to deny it?
Wasted my youth on trying to grow up. Wasted my future, never showed up.
Yeah, you could say we have a bit of a theme going on at this point. And this is another song that I'm actually shocked is this low on the list. On an album that is very introspective about how he spent his 20s, Drayton Farley delivered this emotional gut punch, a simple and gorgeous little song with touches of organ, where he reflects on a youth that he feels like he completely wasted, giving everything of himself for his country, and ending up feeling like he really didn't get much back from it. Now finding himself in his 30s and getting by on less and less, needing to adjust to life back home now that he feels like he doesn't really have a purpose, and wondering if that purpose was even worth it to begin with. And yet he's gonna carry on, because it's the only thing he can do. It's a song that's not exactly hopeful, but resigned and stoic in a way that I really look up to. It strikes me as someone who knows that he's got to work on himself and adjust, but that it's going to take time, and admitting that is okay. It's just one of the most striking country songs of the year for me, especially as someone who is now in their, oh god, late 20s, I'm so old. But jokes aside, this song is absolutely fantastic, and the main reason that I kept coming back to 20 on High time and time again this year.
Baby, why don't you come over?
Oh, look at that! It's... okay. Chappelle Roan was easily one of the best pop stars to come out of 2023. Someone with such a knack for making pop fun again that I absolutely fell in love with her in many, many ways from the moment that I started listening to her music. And while this is certainly not the last time we'll be talking about her on this list, this is arguably one of her most fun songs. A song where she basically plays a very promiscuous young woman who wants to give you a good time, play into your kinks and fantasies, even promising to dress up like a rabbit for you, where it all feels like she's willing to do it, but she's really going to be doing it more for her pleasure than yours. It's one of those situations where you might actually get intimidated by her, she might be too enthusiastic, but hell, she just wants to get freaky and make this bed get squeaky. Are you in or out? Again, one of the most fun pop performers to come out of this year, and for me at least, this was the easy early favorite. Does that camera angle look a little different? Probably not. Either way, let's keep the fun going, kind of.
But here I am thinking, what if Michael Keaton killed himself in multiplicity? Would that be genocide?
So on the one hand, I do agree with a lot of critics saying that Michael Keaton is one of the funniest and best written songs to be released in 2023, as well as one of Rustin Kelly's best songs to date. Now, I don't quite think it's his best song, Radio Cloud is just so high above everything else for me, but I also do think that the song is surprisingly really mature. A song where he essentially seems to be having an internal dialogue with himself, where he's been broken up with, he's sitting at home just getting stoned, questioning in his elevated state whether or not Michael Keaton killing himself in multiplicity might be considered genocide. Meanwhile, on the verses, he appears to be having an argument with someone, telling them to get up off their ass and get over her, because what you're doing right now is absolutely pathetic. Even saying that all this whining is killing his vibe and he will burn this fucking house down if you don't stop. Which again, considering this is essentially a divorce album, and is followed up with songs where he's clearly trying to pick himself up and get back out there, very much backs up my internal monologue theory. Which honestly, yeah, sometimes you need to give yourself a stern talking to if you realize that you're stagnating, and if getting stoned is what it takes, then more power to you. Again, it's one of the slightly tragic moments where I can really see why he and Casey Musgraves made such a good couple, but at the same time, I'm glad that he's clearly emotionally mature enough to move on in a healthy way.
Running from the guns, point and shoot. We used to play up on the playground. Running from the guns, who thought hardest part would be for me to stay down.
I'll admit admit it took me a while to come around to McKinley-Dixon. I liked For My Mama, yada yada yada, but it was just really hard to revisit for me. But Beloved Paradise Jazz became a real staple on my gym playlist this year, and therefore I've come to really love the album, which we'll talk more about in the next video. And while for the longest time I actually thought Tyler Forever would take the top spot for me, in the end the remix with Blue is what eventually pushed this over the top for me. I love Blue's verse, it's incredibly well structured, and his energy more than matches McKinley's, giving the song a much more politically charged feel in the first verse that then carries over into McKinley's verse even better. And with that killer hook that was always fucking fantastic, this is easily one of the quintessential rap songs of 2023.
Knee deep in the passenger seat and you're eating me out. Is it casual now?
The second Chappelle Roan song on this list, and the first one I heard from her. I first heard this as a single last year, and for the longest time I didn't think it would make the album in order to qualify for this list. But it did, so I'm talking about it now. Because this song is both devastating, funny, and also kind of weirdly complicated. It's a song in which she is in a so-called casual relationship, at least according to her partner. But while said partner is going down on her casually in the car, she does start to question if it really is that casual, considering that she's met all of their friends as well as their mother. And it's this weird tug of war where she asks if they're really casual, but if they are, she's happy to go along with that, even though deep down it's clear that it does kind of bother her. It's an odd mix of emotions that she plays incredibly well. And with the gorgeous and slow synths and the fantastic harmonies, which by the way are really consistent across that entire album, it's phenomenal sounding. This ended up being a slow burn that really grew on me by the end.
Yeah, today ain't been fun, but not as bad as day one.
So I was late to Ward Davis, but I did check out his EP that he dropped this year, and while the EP as a whole is kind of mid in my opinion, the standout track from it is easily Day One. A song about a recovering addict, whether that be drugs, alcohol, or both, where he talks about how much genuine suffering it puts him through every single day, how sobriety isn't easy. After all, he no longer has anything to dull his emotions or forget about his past mistakes. And yet on the crux of the chorus where he goes into just how rough it is being sober now, he does remind us that even though today hasn't been fun, it wasn't as bad as Day One. It's the tough thing about sobriety where it's not an easy thing to do, and there are days where it is going to suck, but ultimately, he knows that he's still better off taking this road to recovery, because it still means that he's in a better place than he was in before. Recovery, in any form, has its pitfalls, as I'm sure we all know, and this song represents that absolutely beautifully, with one of the most haggard and best voices in this industry to deliver this message.
So at this point my camera stand broke, and so it was mainly filming my chest for most of the rest of this portion, but the audio is still in good condition, so let's improvise.
I'm stranded in the desert with my empty and wicked hands.
So surprisingly, I haven't seen a lot of love for this song off the album, which is weird because it's easily my favorite. The simple fact that he name-dropped Sufjan Stevens on this song already earned it big points in my book, but when it's then framed as the relationship where he was supposed to recover and be happy, and at the point of the album where he thinks he's moved on, it turns out that he still has a lot of work to do. It's a very hard lesson to learn after you've been through a major breakup, but one that's incredibly valuable as well. And so he does the mature thing and breaks it off with his current girlfriend. Because it's not fair on her to just drag her along when he's the one who has shit to work out. Again, a certain artist that I talked about in my worst songs of 2023 video could really stand to listen to this guy. But regardless, it's one of the most introspective and raw songs that Rustin Kelly has ever put out, with a killer chorus that absolutely burns, but necessarily so.
Is it okay if I say I'm not feeling alright? This is your life.
So I said before that the Academics' most recent album was the one where all of their potential finally coalesced into their best work to date. But while again, we'll talk more about that in my next video, This Is Your Life is the moment on the album where, after all the second guessing and excuses and claims that you're just a weirdo that nobody understands, this is the slap in the face which reminds you that this is your life, and how you spend it is up to you, and there's no need to apologize or reflect all that much, because what matters is what you do with it now. It's the kick up the ass that I really needed to hear multiple times this year when I was just making excuses or putting off projects, where you can throw as much of a pity party for yourself as you want, as long as you're willing to get back up and actually put in the effort afterwards. Paired with one of their best hooks ever, and that's saying something for this band, and you have a song that damn near rivals their best for me. You know, considering this is the year I got married, you'd think I'd listen to more comforting music. So how about a dose of that, please?
So something brings you right back to growing up.
Okay, there we go. Laurie McKenna, the artist who I've said on multiple occasions gives me mommy issues. Jokes aside though, this is an artist that I hold in incredibly high regard. Where every single time she drops an album, there's 1,000 little nuggets of wisdom that I take away with me, and where the very best of her material just gets better with time. I can think of at least 5 albums in her catalogue off the top of my head that I still go back to regularly. And this is a song about the joys of growing up. Well, okay, not really. It's a song looking back at your childhood and all the ways in which you've grown, but also realizing now and again that things have changed and moved on around you. And even though you think that you're grown up and up to date with everything you're supposed to be, there are moments that still make you feel like a kid and that you've still got a lot to learn and a lot of growing up to do. It's the sobering reminder that we're never really done learning and growing, even long after we've supposedly moved on from our roots. And Laurie McKenna just paints it in an excellent word picture like few others can. Yet another of the many reasons why she is my favorite songwriter working in music. And this song, while it is a harsh lesson, is still one that makes me just want to be wrapped up in swaddling clothes and held by her. In a nice way, you guys, it's wholesome.
Buried alive inside my dreams, but it was all a fake out.
So this is the second Fall Out Boy song in my top 100, and it's a bit of a weird one because, honestly, I thought So Much for Stardust was very patchy. An album that I can definitely call decent, but with how much of a mixed bag it is, I'm not sure if I'd call it good. And yet the high points are just so fucking phenomenal that this isn't even the best song on the project. But while we have it here, this is a song where you realize that all the dreams that you've claimed to have for years and years and years now are actually a load of bullshit. And now that you've committed to them and that you're in this relationship, which is what it is, you are just desperately trying to find a way out. It's a song that is clearly supposed to mirror Fall Out Boy's own career, where they essentially set out to be one thing, and then when they got that thing, they weren't happy with it. And I think there is a certain amount of self-awareness to be able to recognize and admit that. It also has easily one of the best hooks that this band has come up with in years, where the more synth-heavy vibes actually work phenomenally well with Patrick Stump's vocals, and that short little bridge where he looks back at his younger self so full of ambition and realizes that he's become something he doesn't even recognize anymore, carries a weight and tragedy that I didn't know this band could still bring to the table. And speaking of older acts giving you 80s goodness, Birdie is not an artist that I expected to be talking about much in 2023, but she dropped multiple singles I really liked and even an album that was pretty great. But among all of it, this was the absolute star maker. If Fake Out is the realization that your dreams were never that good to begin with, Paradise Calling is that hopeful yearning that said dreams may still come true one day. It's the youthful, hopeful innocence that comes before the disappointment, where all you ever wanted was a love that would absolutely shoot for the stars. And that's exactly what this song does in terms of its sound and its lyrics, where Birdie gives a career best performance hollering about how she always wanted something to believe in, a love that would transcend all others. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a type of song that you've heard before, especially with the recent 80s revival of 2020 and 2021, but she sells it so fucking well and with so much raw power and passion that it went above and beyond its influences and truly did become transcendent.
I went to Paris, Texas. with a suitcase in my hand.
That's right. In the year of our Lord 2023, a Lana Del Rey song made my top 50. And believe it or not, it's here without a single caveat. Now, I was in the minority in thinking that Lana's 2023 album was honestly kind of a mixed bag. Definitely her best since Norman fucking Rockwell, but I don't quite think it was as good. But I will fully admit that she has never made a song that hit me as strongly as this one. You see, Lana Del Rey across multiple albums, but also in her real life, has made it clear that she's trying to cling on to this image of a young and adventurous woman. And yet in 2023, she was forced to recognize that she is getting older, and still no stable love life. And to me, this was the song on the album that really did encapsulate the fear of how fleeting your life can be. Where she shows herself moving from place to place, always trying to be the young, flirty person there, until she catches up to the crowd in age, and she eventually becomes the old, sad single one. But instead of letting that sink in, she'd rather just move on to the next group, once again take on that role that she desperately wants to cling on to. Until eventually, she runs out of time and moves back home. The one place she said she'd never move back to, and yet, once she gets back, everyone greets her as if they knew that's where she was always going to end up. And while they may mean that comfortingly and say that she's supposed to be there, it is the most devastating and hurtful thing she's ever had to admit to herself. And with her career best vocal and songwriting performance, this quiet little song just crept deep inside my heart and refused to let go. Congratulations, Lana. You genuinely made me feel really, really bad for you.
Oh, did you ever love a woman with a death wish? Something in her eyes like flipping off a light switch.
Okay, so some of you may have realized if you saw part 1 of this video, but despite the fact that I've said that there is a 3-artist limit to this list, I am making an exception when an artist makes an album so goddamn transcendent that it would honestly feel cheap if I didn't highlight more than 3. While also wanting to find a compromise because, spoilers, there's 8 Jason Isbell songs on this list in total. And if I included 8 songs by one artist, I'd be stealing spots from other artists and I'd feel bad. And look, the bottom line is nobody's complained about this except for one person. That's my brother. Happy birthday and fuck you. Anyway, that aside, this is Death Wish, a song where Jason Isbell asks if you've ever been with a partner who's been suicidal. And this is the album opener, where he, in painful-ass detail, sketches out what it's like to be with a partner who is so defeatist and self-loathing, trying to say all the right things and prop them up when you know that there's only so much you can really do. It's that feeling of being incredibly helpless but still trying to fight, still trying to be the voice of positivity. A voice which I have had to take on in the past, and it can be exhausting. Especially when you can tell that the person on the other side of it is so special and wonderful, and you want them to see themselves the way that you see them. It's saying a lot that a song that hits me this deeply with such an amazing fucking chorus is only my 5th favorite song on the album, but I would be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't include it on this list, because it is one of the many reasons why Weather Vanes is the best album of 2023. We all knew it, don't act like it's a surprise. Please do still watch the next video though, it's going to take a lot of work.
So why can't I stay a while when I have her on my mind?
So I mentioned before that a certain person on my worst list really needed to listen to Rustin Kelly. Well, spoilers if you haven't seen my worst list, but that artist is Cian Ducrot, who made the song Everyone Falls in Love, which is one of the worst songs I've ever heard. If you want more context on that, go watch that video. But if you want basically the exact same scenario, but actually done well, Inhaler's been a band that I've actually praised a number of times on this show. On the blog, on Instagram, even on a couple of live streams. And that is because they are one of the best Irish rock bands working today, and if you have not been paying attention to them, you should really start now, because they're going to be huge. Because while I struggle to choose between this or My Honest Face as my favorite Inhaler song, this came dangerously close. You see, When I Have Her on My Mind is a song where the protagonist finds himself in a relationship where he can't stop thinking about his ex. Sound familiar? And he fully admits that while he has this frame of mind, he's not going to be able to move on with anyone else. Because he admits himself that he could go as far as he could in his current relationship, but only his ex could ever get him there, to a point where he really wants to commit and be that solid partner. And the thing is, he's not a perfect person. In fact, in the first 2 verses, he doesn't want to move on, asking if it's really so wrong and why can't he just stay a while and enjoy this even if he does have this girl on his mind. But the difference is, by the 3rd verse, he concedes. He admits that he's got a lot of work to do, and even though it's painful and hard to explain, he ends the relationship, admitting to her that for now, he's not ready to move on. He's got this other person on his mind. And while it sucks that he's alone again and that he's now hurt this new person, ultimately, it's the mature thing to do. Again, I always liked this song, but once I noticed all the parallels and just how much better it was handled here, it just vaulted to a whole other level of quality for me, easily getting into the top 30. A stellar song with stellar writing, stellar guitar work, and an amazing chorus. Once again, listen to this band if you haven't already. Jesus Christ, we've had songs about your partner being suicidal, the entire mess on a few songs now of how complicated relationships are. God, how do I put this into words? Love is just,
Now it don't need to think God loves fucking embarrassing, just watch.
Thank you. The voice of our generation. Or, you know, the last generation. Who do I belong to again? Anyway, it doesn't matter, because she's dead right. And in the process made, well again, it's hard to say her best song. Brutal is still fucking phenomenal. But it was the song that the moment I heard it, I knew would be a lock for this list. For one, in a weird way it reminds me a lot in the vocal intonations and the pacing of Billy Joel's You May Be Right. But aside from that weird parallel, it's a song where she time and time again is coming through for this guy who clearly isn't really into her, constantly talking about his ex, crying about how he fucked up his previous relationship. And yet, time and time again, she keeps coming back. The fool in love who repeatedly makes the same mistakes and keeps coming back for more. Because love may be embarrassing, love may not make a lick of sense, but at the end of the day, she knows that she's still gonna fall for it. For me at least, it's one of the funniest moments on the album. Which is saying something, there's actually a surprising amount of good comedy on Guts, and easily the best hook on it as well, thundering out as soon as every chorus hits. Thank you for this one, Olivia Rodrigo. We need more people like you to just tell it how it is. Okay, so remember this year when Daft Punk did this?
We've come too far.
Yeah, that was a mistake. God, if only there was a modern-sounding Daft Punk ripoff to make me feel better.
I'm gonna bust out through to you. She was born to wreck your body, baby.
Look, I'm not saying the US girls are actively stealing from Daft Punk, but there are several elements of this song that remind me of Random Access Memories. And I mean that in the best possible way, because this song is awesome. If anything, I'd say it's Daft Punk crossed with Lemon Demon, you know, Neil Cicierega's alter ego? Because this is a song about a sentient tuxedo, which is lying on your bed, waiting to be worn and held in that special way, and where if you're not wearing it, it feels incredibly neglected and sad. I mean, just look at the title. It's called Tux, Your Body Fills Me, Boo. It's weirdly sexual, very surreal, and incredibly humorous. Not to mention, it sounds fucking phenomenal. I know that a lot of people sort of skipped over the US Girls album this year because it was a noticeable step down from their last big project, but trust me, this song is the exception. You know, sometimes it's not complicated. Sometimes all you need is an amazing hook, an artist you absolutely adore belting her heart out on it, verses that remind me of her best Golden Era EP, with a chorus that could easily match the very best of her best album, Warrior, and a strident, in-your-face chorus that refuses to be silenced. This was one of the most uplifting and punchy choruses of the entire year. I didn't expect it to be the song from Gag Order that would stick for me the most, but considering that album is all about people trying to keep her silent, and this is the moment where Kesha just roars, is it any wonder that it would end up being my favorite on the album?
Those eyes across the room.
I swear to God, the theory that the B-sides of Carly Rae's albums are always better than the original, they don't always hold fully true, but I will say that whenever she makes this list, it seems to be from that B-sides project. Because my God, Shy Boy is the best song that she's released in about 4 years. A challenging, cheeky little pop song where she asks you if you're actually gonna try and turn her on. Dancing around you playfully with that gorgeous little voice of hers. It actually reminds me a lot of my favorite Carly Rae song, Want You in My Room, because it nails that balance of being both cute and incredibly horny, and somehow manages to make both sound phenomenal. It's a fantastic little hook, it's incredibly well produced, and whenever it would come on, especially when I was having my morning cup of coffee, it just put a big smile on my face every single time.
Take a mic and press record and speak the truth. Only.
So, Sampha came back this year, and absolutely blew my fucking mind. I really loved his last album from 2017. It's one of the first albums I actually reviewed on this channel. But I wasn't expecting that after a 6-year hiatus with only a few features here and there, he would come back with something of this magnitude. And while that conversation is better saved for another video, this song was the easy highlight for me. For one, it's easily the most playful Sampha has ever sounded, where every single vocal inflection is timed and executed perfectly, moving around the mix similarly to Bunny as a Rider by Caroline Polachek, but here it's somehow even more dynamic, with the backing vocals, the rewinds, the multiple little bursts of instrumentation that come in and out, and that phenomenal chorus that ties it all together. It's the song where Sampha claims to be moving on faith and faith only, and it really sounds like it, as if he's just let himself go to the mix and is trusting that it'll take him exactly where he needs to be. And he always ends up exactly where I want him every time. It's kind of just a perfect song. It's hard to really put it into words. And the only reason it's this low on the list is because, once again, I think the album just works better as a whole. And also, well, let's see what's behind door number 2.
Yeah, it was love, then it was just married.
Yay, another song about divorce. What the fuck? Anyway, yeah, remember how Morgan Wallen had that whole clever thing on his chorus about last night not being the last night? Well, what if you took that same idea, but actually made it good and compelling and remotely easy to listen to? Well, then you'd have the most devastating and best song that Kelsea Ballerini has ever made. A song where she realizes that after a good while of being married, they've gone from loving each other to just being married. From just married to just married. It is devastating, and Kelsea Ballerini spares absolutely no detail in just how unhappy this makes her. She tried, she really wanted this relationship to work, but whatever she tries to give, she's just not getting back in the same way. And ultimately, it's not that anyone's particularly at fault, but it's just not working anymore. Where they just don't have time for each other in the same way they did before, which she admits she's partly responsible for that as well. After all, she's living the life of a musician. But when you start off wanting kids and having that beautiful wedding, and ultimately you get to a point where you're honestly ready to undo I Do. It's one of the most slickly written songs that I've heard in years. I never expected this to come from her, an artist who's predominantly known for pop country ballads. But you know what? Even though this must have been incredibly hard to make, it made for some of the best music of her career. And at least for me, this song, God, it absolutely floored me. Definitely one I'm going to be using as a cautionary tale in what not to do.
I can fix it. Pull over that ass too fast. Hit the ATM and grab more cash. Yes, love, feeling like a new man. I was dreaming in the life, then I woke up in the...
I mean, this guy. I know that this is technically a J-Rock song, but let's be honest, it is Anderson .Paak's song. He has the hook, he has the best verse, and he is by far the biggest reason why this kicks absolute ass. Easily one of my favorite rap songs in years. Honestly, if something like this hit the radio, I don't know if we'd be able to recover. It moves at the pace of Bubblein'. All three performers deliver terrific performances. J-Rock is of course fantastic, but I was actually quite surprised by Latto, who, when you compare this verse to all of the shots that Nicki threw at her on Pink Friday 2, clearly came out as the winner. She's never sounded better than she does here. But once again, it's just Anderson .Paak. The phenomenal swerving chorus, the fact that he drops into a double time flow at the start of his own verse, and the fact that all the instrumentals peel away to just the horns for the second part of his verse, as he proclaims that despite all of the swagger, he loves you, girl, in a way that I haven't heard him deliver this well since probably Malibu. It's a fucking phenomenal roller coaster of a song, and has been a personal favorite of mine since the day I heard it.
And you could kiss the skin from my lips if it makes you feel good. I'm not sure if you want it, not sure if you need me to.
So at this stage, I'm pretty comfortable calling this Lovejoy's best song. Which is funny because it's by far their nerdiest. A track where they are desperately horny, but are trying to keep up the composure as much as possible and just casually say that you can call them what you like, as long as you call them. And all of that horniness just breaks through the dam on that chorus. Before going into absolute overload once the bridge hits, with one of my favorite lines of the year being, "I'm not paranoid, I'm a realist. I know you're gonna kill me." It's an absolutely phenomenal, wild ride of a rock song, and my main reason why I really think this band, they're something special.
If it's out of the bag, then it's out of the bag. If it's out of the bag, then it's out of the bag. Now that is a powerful cat.
On the other hand, I've been aware this guy's a legend for fucking years at this point. In fact, if I haven't said it on the record before, this guy is my favorite rapper, without question. The way that he can twist bars and metaphors and pull on his incredible vocabulary has led time and time again to phenomenal projects. Where even if I'm kind of cool on it at first, I always end up liking it more and more, similar to Laurie McKenna. And I personally think this single might be the best thing he's dropped since 2016. A song all about the dangers of machinery, and how anything we build to be utilitarian will eventually be used for violence. And what I love most about this is that if you've known Aesop Rock for a while now, he almost adopts the "There Goes Larry" flow, which is a children's song, and which the music video kind of mimics the art style for, so it kind of feels like he's explaining the end of humanity at the hands of the technology we create to children, paired with a bananas beat, which he produced himself apparently, and the phenomenal chorus that flips the idiom of letting the cat out of the bag. And you have one of my favorite songs that he's made in years. Not quite up there with Shrunk, but it's definitely close.
But you're not haunted, you just miss everything.
So Spanish Love Song's sophomore album is widely agreed not to be as good as their first one, but I'll be damned if this song didn't stick with me. What I like a lot about No Joy, even if I don't like it as much as the first album, is that it's very much dealing with somebody else's problems and grief. Trying to be that shoulder to cry on, that support system even when it's difficult. Look again at Death Wish. But Haunted is somehow even better, because it is desperately trying to keep you alive. Reassuring you time and time again that you're not a ghost, you're not dead yet, so don't you dare give up. And it's also incredibly empathetic, reaching out a hand and admitting that it's not easy, life fucking sucks sometimes. But at the end of the day, even if it's selfish, he doesn't want to let you go. It's a harrowing song that thankfully I don't have too much experience dealing with. But my god, with the cinematic synths and the powerful hook, this song struck a chord that damn near reached the heights of that first album. I'm just gonna say it. This song was robbed. Worldwide, we could have had a second Hozier song become as big as Take Me to Church, and instead we're relegated to, what, David fucking Kushner? But despite my slight bitterness towards that song's success, I don't really see why so many people hate it as much as they do. I was genuinely disappointed to see that Eat Your Young wasn't a hit, because it's just fucking phenomenal, easily Hozier's best song since his debut. It's a dystopian, capitalist wet dream, in which Hozier provides an anthem for all of the older generation of the world to eat their young. taking as much advantage as they could of the world's resources to get rich without any regard for what they would leave behind for the next generation. It is biting political commentary where Hozier doesn't pull any punches, where he slips into that upper register that felt a little bit shaky on his last album, which he perfected for Unreal on Earth, and with all the gothic backing vocals, the instrumentation. If they played this in churches, you would know that our generation and below are all fucked, and it's time for the apocalypse. And I would gladly join Hozier in the resistance.
It's time to close the tab. If you insist on being lonely, let me put you in a cab.
Okay, I promise this is the last Jason Isbell song I'm cheating with. And I've seen a lot of interpretations for this one. Some people say it's a sequel to Chaos and Clothes, where a man Jason Isbell previously defended ended up just not being worth the hassle as he finally lets him go. But while that has some merit, I personally like to view it like this. I think the perspective on this song, the protagonist, switches throughout it. The first verse is all from the point of view of a wife, giving her husband one last chance to redeem himself, even though it doesn't look like he's going to change his behavior. Then the second verse is from said husband after his wife kicks him out, trying desperately to make that connection again and failing miserably. The third verse is from a young lady who approaches him, trying to rekindle something quick and easy when really he just wants a long-term relationship. And finally the fourth verse is back to the husband again, standing outside his wife's door, banging on it, waiting to be let in. Because despite all of his bravado, he actually misses her. He wants to try and make up for his mistakes, even though it's likely too late. This is my interpretation, and honestly, with the phenomenal production on this song, the soft pattering drum and the choral vocals that come in towards the end are gorgeous, and Jason Isbell's low-key, almost resigned delivery, it makes the song something truly captivating. Damn near close to one of my absolute favorites off the album, but we'll get to those in a second.
I was suffering more than I let on. The tropic morning news was on. There's nothing stopping me now.
I'll admit, it took me a long time to warm to this song. I initially heard it back in January, and I liked it. It had some good elements and some good guitar parts. But then the album as a whole didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to, and yet that just made me more intrigued why this one did. And then the meaning of the song finally clicked. It's a song where the protagonist comes down to breakfast and starts to have an argument, one that he was woefully unprepared for, and where he's so caught off guard by it that he can't properly collect and formulate his thoughts. Faced with someone who is far more eloquent and better equipped and ready for this conversation than he was, and as the tropic morning news thunders in the background, it's all that fills his head as he starts to panic, trying desperately to find the right words and accidentally just insulting the person out of sheer panic, knowing that that's probably the nail in the coffin. Because he wasn't prepared, the relationship's probably going to end. Because more than likely, that's what the conversation was trying to resolve in the first place. I'll be honest, as somebody who is self-diagnosed with ADHD, and has in the past had to rehearse conversations in his head before having them in real life because I'm afraid to get the words wrong and say something I don't mean, the lyrics on this song hit me way harder than they probably should. It's one of those songs that almost feels so human that I'm shocked that nobody's made a song like it before. Again, maybe a song that I relate to just a little bit too strongly, but it's a fucking excellent one. This one snuck up on me.
Took more than I ever could give. Why couldn't love be the wonder drug?
For a long time, I thought Growing Up was going to be the easy standout for me. Which was kind of weird because normally there's at least one Laurie McKenna song that ends up being in my top 15 or my top 10 songs of the year. And it felt a bit weird that 1988, despite how great it is, didn't have a standout track like that. But then Wonder Drug hit, and then kept hitting, and oh my god, it hurt. You see, much like Kelsea Ballerini's Just Married, this is a song about how love was supposed to be the wonder drug, but it isn't working anymore. And because Laurie McKenna is such a phenomenal songwriter, she goes into so many metaphors and details that honestly shock me that she can still come up with something like this late into her career. It's a song where she has put in the work. They've gone to therapy, they've talked, they've done everything they could to save this marriage. And yet despite everything, his flaws are just far too clear to her at this point. The cracks in the relationship are impossible to keep covering up. As she laments that even after trying so hard and doing what she's supposed to do, love couldn't be that wonder drug. And look, this also works very much for me personally. I adore songs that take the "your love is my drug" cliche and then flip it on its head. Another reason that Post Malone's song Chemical is so amazing, by the way. And after growing on me for months, it was unquestionably my favorite song on the album. Well done again, Laurie McKenna. You always fucking nail it.
And the feeling gets stronger as the loops got longer. Too stepping too close to the line.
So despite the fact that Diamonds is clearly the emotional crux of the album, the one you're supposed to think is the best song on there, I would make the argument that the album wouldn't work at all without this song. You see, Two-Steppin' is the point of the album before it all goes wrong, where Amanda Fields finds herself out late one night in a bar, where something in her gut just tells her she doesn't want to go home just yet and just wants to hang out and have a moment of peace, when at that moment, she spots a stranger across the room. They smile, they wink a bit, and they start dancing. But it doesn't go any further. Because despite the fact that she can tell this is a really good guy and might even be a better fit for her than her current partner, she wouldn't do that to him. She's made a commitment and she knows it would be wrong to betray that trust. And my god, in the context of the album, that is a punch to the gut like no other. Because on the very next song, she finds out her husband is cheating on her. And this meaningless little intrusive thought she had slow dancing with this stranger, it could have been her escape, but she's too good of a person for that. And it really makes you root for her throughout the entire album. Again, this song just hits me emotionally so hard, but the slow two-step-in waltzing flow of it is also just gorgeous. The details in the song and Amanda Fields' sweet vocals are absolutely breathtaking. And frankly, the only reason it's not even higher is because outside of the context of the album, it might not work as well or hit as hard emotionally without that context. But my god, if there was ever a reason to check out that album as a whole, I hope that this convinces you. So yeah, we've had quite a few songs in a row now that are just devastatingly human, but honestly, I can't think of a better way to encapsulate the human experience in music than through sheer misery. Well, except for maybe being incredibly horny.
With insignias gleaming, with the body count higher than a mosquito.
Look, Model Actress has already received a ton of critical acclaim at this point, so me placing this high on this list, it really shouldn't be any surprise. And yet, if anything, I'm the one that's surprised. I mean, this song is just horny on main, where Model Actress is careening from one relationship to the next, racking up that body count as high as a mosquito, and screaming and wailing down that tunnel of debauchery all the way, with the standout chorus on the project that just kept bringing me back time and time again. Again, we'll talk about Model Actress more in my next video. In the meantime though, holy shit, this was a shot of adrenaline that I didn't know I needed, but kept coming back to throughout the year.
She used to make me feel like the king of Oklahoma, but nothing makes me feel like much of nothing anymore.
We're almost in our top 10, and we have our first official Jason Isbell in the 400 unit entry. And my god, what a fucking song it is. Honestly, the fact that this is the best song on the album, when it's honestly one of the best songs that Jason Isbell has released in about 6 years, is baffling to me. I'm also shocked that it wasn't one of the lead-off singles. Sure, it got pushed a bit later, but my god. You see, on an album that is primarily all about Jason Isbell's failures as a result of his own toxic masculinity, King of Oklahoma is basically the story of Tony Soprano, a figure that was on top of the world, feared by many and loved by his fucking wife, who would feed him, give him coffee every morning, and treat him like an absolute king, just as he deserves. And then, years and years later, His entire empire has fallen apart. Everyone's abandoned him, he's no longer an important figure, his wife has left him and has told him that his kids are not going to know him, and he's left alone wondering how the hell all of this happened. Even trying desperately years later to set up another job, but his back's too sore and he's too out of shape to actually get any of it done. And what I really think works about the song is that he never fully comes to the realization that this is his fault. This is a man that is stuck in that mindset, so sure that everybody else is the problem, they're the ones who betrayed him, when in fact he's been the toxic element from the very beginning. It's a fantastic song about the rise and inevitable fall of those kings, who will be toppled when the underside of power rears its head. And Jason Isbell sells this with the muscle and rock presence that even at this stage I am shocked to see from the 400 unit. Honestly, of all the songs on the album where I would normally say Jason Isbell is the main highlight, they deserve just as big of a credit on this. It's a terrific song, an instant classic on arrival, and I have yet to meet a country or rock fan that hasn't fucking adored it.
Down at the Pink Pony Club, I'm gonna keep on dancing at the Pink Pony Club.
So I've already said this at multiple times already, but I got to work in the burlesque scene this year. Mostly as an MC and volunteering in small parts in other people's acts, but it's introduced me to a whole world of fun, and there's a lot of my own theatre background that I can pull from as well. So putting all those passions together in one year, it makes sense that Chappelle Roan's Pink Pony Club is this high. A song about a girl who, despite her mom's best wishes, is gonna go to the big city and become a stripper. Dancing on that stage in the Pink Pony Club, where despite the fact that many people might be aghast at her life choices, it's what makes her happy, and she's gonna perform her heart out because that's what's most important. Like Casual, it's a song that I actually heard long before the album came out, but this is the one that grew on me most of all due to my own personal experiences this year. I can't think of another song to better soundtrack the joy I feel when I get on that stage with those lovely people in the audience and around me. And the fact that a normal pop song in 2023 can sound this fucking amazing. Look, take notes, people. This is what we want on the radio.
Don't wash the cast iron skillet. Don't drink and drive, you spill it.
You know, there's a part of me that's kind of stunned at this song. Jason Isbell's always had a knack for writing these songs in a slightly more low-key tone, where the songwriting is a bit more abstract, you kind of need to read between the lines to really get the message. And he doesn't make them very often, but whenever he does, if you really take the time to parse out the details, you're usually left with something truly special. In this case, he uses the metaphor of the cast iron skillet, a symbol of Southern traditionalism because you're not supposed to wash the cast iron skillet, it's a classic country value. But then you juxtapose those with other classic country values, like when a young girl starts dating a boy of color, and his family doesn't like that. And not only might they cut her off, they might get rid of him altogether, even at the cost of her happiness. It's essentially a song about how traditions can be rooted in dark and very ugly sentiments, and how just because it's something that you're expected to do, it doesn't mean you shouldn't scrutinize the deeper meaning of what's going on behind it. And on an album like Weather Vanes, which is all about trying to overcome those old bad habits, it's a centerpiece that I really don't think should go overlooked. Easily one of Jason Isbell's best songs ever. And no, it's still not the best on the album. So you were all expecting to see this somewhere. I wonder how many of you guessed that it would be this high.
Pictures in passing time, you only smile like that when you're drinking. I wish I didn't, but I do. Remember every moment on the nights with you.
I'll admit, the Zach Bryan album has grown on me a lot over the last few months. I liked it at first, but then I just kept coming back to it. And the more I went back to it, the more this song grew on me as well. And then the success that it saw, and seeing so many people heap praises onto it, it just made me love it more and more and more. It's the kind of song where some people might call it overrated, but I think it's perfectly rated, because this is an instant classic on arrival. An alcohol-soaked mire of regrets as Zach Bryan looks back on a failed relationship, where he remembers all those personal and uncomfortable details, where he might drink to forget, trying to put it all behind him, but he remembers every single moment. And it just hurts all the more. And I also love that he makes it clear that the reason that they broke up was probably because of him. He takes ownership of that. It was probably because he doesn't know how to properly process his emotions. Which is only backed up by the wonderful Casey Musgraves verse, where she responds to him very similarly to Kimbra on Somebody That I Used to Know, where she sees him drinking himself into this stupor to ease his mind. But when the hell is he going to ease hers? Honestly, that line alone made this a lock for this list. But the fact that she still looks back on him very fondly, she wishes that they could have worked out but just didn't have the emotional bandwidth anymore, and knows that the fact that she still wants him is at the root of a lot of her own personal failures. As someone who has gone on the record of saying that they adore duets by two people of the opposite sex, this is one of the best written examples that I've heard in years. Two people that are clearly broken, clearly trying to be better, but are also clearly not entirely guilt-free, trying to move on and yet still so messily involved. It's a song that is bound to just keep growing on me over the years. It's already being hailed as a classic in country, and for once, I got the hype from the very beginning. This is incredible. As most of you know, one of my favorite songs of all time is Mr. Brightside by The Killers. So if Somebody's Child is going to bring back The Killers' 2000 sound, I'm not going to complain, especially when it goes this hard. You see, sometimes dreams don't come true. You can fight for them as much as you want, but end up in the last place you want to be in. And this is a song where Somebody's Child finds himself at that impasse. After all his dreams, all his hard work, it's not paying off. He's not able to make it, and he's gotten to a stage in his life where he's near giving up. But then the chorus hits, that note of hope that he refuses to let go of, as he howls out with his entire vocal range that he can't fail. He might sound like a broken fucking record, he's not who he may want to be, and it's getting harder to believe every single day, but he's not going to give up. To me at least, it's the most inspirational song of the year, where a young Irish boy dreamed a dream and actually made it come true, as Somebody's Child actually saw a huge amount of success this year, which was all well deserved. You should check out the self-titled album, it's great. And from the very beginning, I knew that this song was going to be the highlight. What a fucking gem.
Hard to tell that when you're in it, sometimes a moment's too profound. But if I had to bet my money, that's when country came back to town.
So weirdly enough, I think most of you watching this probably know Brent Cobb from his cousin's album Southern Family by Dave Cobb, a well-known country producer who has received a lot of critical acclaim over the past decade. Brent Cobb had a song on that album called Down Home, which is more of a low-key, hangdog, chill kind of song, a moment of respite from the heavier material. And while that song is fantastic, I think this might be his best. You see, in a year where country was under more scrutiny than ever, to the point where, as a fan of it, it was really hard to keep up with the discourse, Brent Cobb made a love letter to indie country, name-dropping a whole ton of indie country artists. Honestly, if you're a fan of indie country, you need to hear it just for all the shout-outs he gives, every single one of which is filled with love and respect. You can really tell that this song took 7 years to make, as Brent Cobb looks forward to the future, where we'll all look back on this year as the year where country came back to town. Even though, like him, if you've been in the know, you knew that it was always bound to happen. If you were a fan of Jason Isbell, Casey Musgraves, Sturgill Simpson, you knew that eventually country music was going to be on top again. Once again, considering the two complete polar opposites that were Try That in a Small Town and I Remember Everything, that was a weirdly loaded statement in 2023, but it still just oozes with a love for the genre that any country fan can easily get behind. Honestly, in a year like this, I was tempted to put this at number 1 purely out of protest, but as is, it's still in the top 10, and it definitely deserves to be here.
You like me, You ain't leaving.
You know, as much as I love Bunny as a Rider and Sunset and quite a bit of that album, the opening track is really the one that sets the standard, and in my opinion, it might be her best song to date. Purely for the fact that in terms of sheer experimentation in pop music, this is a fucking tour de force. It starts out with those ridiculously high vocals, the echoing backing vocals, the blast of electric guitar that comes in, the pattering little Madonna-esque welcome to my island Vogue-like callbacks, the fact that the chorus absolutely bursts free with that soaring crescendo. Honestly, the different parts of the song coalesce so amazingly well, but when you look at them separately, it doesn't feel like they should fit together. And the fact that they did, that's only because of Caroline Polachek, who gives a career best performance here and sounds, I've used this word before, but fucking transcendent. It's like a goddess who's descended down from the heavens to bless us all. If we could get something like this on the charts, I think it could single-handedly save pop as a genre.
This is why I don't leave the house. You say the coast is clear, but you won't catch me out. Oh, why? This is why.
So remember how I mentioned that Consequences wasn't the only song that was memeified in my household? Look, this year, me and my wife were tired a lot. We have 3 cats, one of which was sick for a good part of the year, then my wife was sick, then I was sick, we got married, we were pretty fucking tired. And at a certain point, especially when a lot of your friends are just your neighbors who can just come from downstairs in the other apartments, why would you ever want to leave the house? Of course, from Paramore's perspective, the song is a fair bit more political. Looking out at the world burning and going, you know what, I'm gonna have an indoor day. And you know what, now that we seem to have officially come out of the pandemic, I think that this mindset should still be made acceptable.
Ironically, now Ireland is seeing an influx of COVID cases.
If you don't want to go outside, you shouldn't be judged for that. And with one of the best and punchiest hooks of Paramore's career, once again, I know this could be seen by some of you as a 2022 song because it originally came out then, but it made the album this year, it's the title track, and I wanted to highlight it on one of these top 50 lists as high as this, so I'm letting it count. I remember when this dropped, it was an event. Fans of the band absolutely flocked to social media to say that the band was back. They hadn't made something this good in about a decade. And while again, I was a little disappointed by the album as a whole, when it came to the single, I couldn't agree more. I think we should all just accept as a society now that The Phoenix is the best Fall Out Boy song. Save Rock and Roll is also a messy album, but that song just reaches titanic heights that the band has never been able to match before or since. But honestly, I might consider this a runner-up. The fact that the first minute of this song is all build-up, and I barely noticed even after listening to it well over 50 times, is already pretty impressive. Because you are just in it for the ride. The songwriting, the hook, the way the chorus just punches you in the face, screaming about the other side of the apocalypse. All of it feels like vintage Fall Out Boy when they were at their very best, before they released albums that were mediocre or sucked complete ass. I don't know how they managed to recapture that spark, even if it was just for this song. But it was a moment of glory that I was absolutely here for. And for a long time, like many of you, I thought it was going to be my song of the year. I mean, as a fan of Fall Out Boy, how could it not be? But there are a couple of caveats. For one, I haven't really been a full Fall Out Boy fan in about 10 years. You know, the last time they released an album that could be considered great by some. And secondly, but also tangentially, there are other artists I'm a fan of who have remained consistent throughout the last decade and more.
Swear you'll save the world when I lose my grip. Tell me you're in control.
My country song of the year, ladies and gentlemen. And it's more rock than anything else. But you know what? I'm well beyond justifying myself at this point. Because even by the lofty, high standards that Jason Isbell has set himself in terms of his best songs, this might just be one of the absolute peaks for me. The cream of the crop, on par with Cover Me Up and Elephant. You see, to quote Beyonce, America has a problem. And that problem is gun control. And as a man who is now in his 40s, seeing the world that still hasn't changed this problem, now with a daughter to worry about, Jason Isbell decided to write a song about it. As the first verse is him on a plane, hearing about yet another mass shooting, who knows which one. Although with the timing that this would have been written, and the line about how the cops just let them die, you can probably guess which one. As he watches his wife crying at the news, and something shifts. The hopeful optimist Jason Isbell, who for years now has been trying to fight for a better America, is starting to doubt, as he's slowly losing the will to fight. And that's what really gets me about this song. It's when so much shit has been thrown your way that you start to question whether this fight is even worth it. It's clearly a message to the next generation, and nowhere is that more clear than in the second verse, where he finds himself in a grocery store shopping for school supplies for his kid. Fuck. As he hears a balloon pop and he nearly jumps out of his skin thinking that a gun might have gone off. And as the cash register tells him he has a lovely child, he's almost speechless with fear, not even knowing what to say to her. Begging his wife to please just keep their daughter home. Maybe they can homeschool her, maybe they can just keep protecting her from the world for as long as possible instead of exposing her to a school, literally somewhere that should be a place of learning and is instead possibly going to be the place where she goes to die. Think about that. It's a song from the point of view of a scared, tired parent who is very close to losing the will to keep going, and yet is just going to beg you to carry on that fight for him. And honestly, on an album that is all about trying to improve himself, this is the moment where he knows that there's only so much he can really do. Extending a hand out to plead for you to please God do the same. It's a desperate and really harrowing song that easily rivals his absolute best. So why isn't it number one? Well, honestly, sometimes I listen to it and I just get really sad. And sometimes I don't want to feel sad, especially not in 2023. So let's say that this is unofficially the best song of the year, because what else could it possibly be? But for me at least. So remember before when I said that my Wrapped for 2023 said that I was mostly pensive and reflective? Well, when I first saw that, this happened to be playing, and I just thought it was very funny. Because in 2023, I was reflective, but most of the time I just wanted to be happy. And in service of that, not many songs did a better job of lifting me up repeatedly than this. Look, I know it may shock you to hear, but I'm a pretty simple guy. I like to be happy. I like to have fun, even if it is usually in the comfort of my own home. And there were so many moments this year where this song came on while I was in the kitchen making dinner, and I just started dancing around the kitchen like a mom in her 40s when the 70s classic radio station comes on. Because yeah, while I do think that that feels good, it might not be Jessie Ware's best album, I will unequivocally say that I think this is her best song. A song that almost brings me to tears of joy whenever it plays, because it's just so uplifting. I can't help but smile whenever it comes on, dancing around, shaking my hair wildly. God, I really need a haircut. And just shaking it till, well, not the pearls fall off, but I usually drop something. It is just one of the most fun songs of the year. And in 2023, I needed to seek out fun. This was a difficult year in many ways. But on that note, so I don't think anybody else is going to fully agree with my number one. Don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people who absolutely love this song. I just don't know if any of them would put it up as the song of the year. But let me tell you a little story. So a couple of days after my wedding, I had two people I was really close to, and they were fighting, and it was very uncomfortable. And I was trying to act as the mediator. I was trying to build a bridge and be there for both of them. But it's hard. It's really exhausting, especially 2 days after your wedding and when really you should be taking time for yourself. And I remember I was sitting on the bus and I just finished a long conversation. I was staring out the window and this song came on and I just started crying. So now that you're feeling nice and sorry for me, with that in mind,
Can you pull the curtains, let me see the sunshine? I think I'm done with my hiding place, and you found me anyway.
I know that after all the critically acclaimed darlings that we've talked about so far, the fact that I'm placing Ed Sheeran above all of them is probably going to make a few of you a little angry. And honestly, I don't know why this is my list, it's very personal to me, but honestly, I don't think that Ed Sheeran has ever made a song that hit me this hard. And I'm no stranger to praising this guy. I've been a fan of him for years, I've said it before. He's had multiple songs that were shoo-ins for these types of lists before. But despite taking my #1 spot for the best hits of a particular year before, he's never quite done it for the songs as a whole. Until now. Because I think Curtains might just be one of the most uplifting and yet harrowing songs that I've ever heard. You see, Ed Sheeran has made it no secret in the last few years, and on a lot of this album it's made abundantly clear, that he's depressed. Fame and success were something that he was hoping to get, but not quite to the degree that he ended up getting, and he has found it difficult. It's why he's gone off of social media multiple times. And on this song, he really tackles that depression. The fact that there are some days where he feels okay, and there are some where he feels at rock bottom. But whenever he's really feeling down, he knows that there's a person in his life, his partner, who he can always turn to. And when she's having those bad days, he'll do the same for her, as each promises to lift the other up, pull back the curtains, so that they can see the sun shine. Because as much as it's easy and tempting to hide away, it's good to step into the light. And it's okay to accept a guiding, loving hand to get you there. Because it's exhausting. And knowing you have someone you can really rely on, someone who can pick you up even when you're feeling shit, that's something that's entirely invaluable. And it's not just that. I also happen to think this is Ed Sheeran's best hook ever. The way that the instrumentation pulls back and then punches through as he screams sunshine, and how despite the verses are very much focused on how he's feeling down, needing to count to 10 to regulate his breath as he comes down from a panic attack, putting up with social situations when in reality you just want to say goodbye and exit the room. The chorus very much focus on the fact that even when he's feeling down, even when he cries, those tears will dry and he'll be okay. And tomorrow's another day. Clearly I'm getting quite emotional even talking about this. And I know that to some of you it may be strange that an Ed Sheeran song has that effect on me. But again, as a longtime fan, as someone who's always known that he's more than just a pop artist, and genuinely seems like a really good guy with a lot of heart, which he sometimes wears just a little bit too much on his sleeve, well hell, that's something I can relate to as well. Either way, Curtains by Ed Sheeran is my song of the year for 2023. Please leave your thoughts on that in the comments below. I ask you to please stay civil. And do share your own top 100 or top 50 songs in the comments below. This felt really good to do. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end. I know it went on a little bit long. And until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is the Social Tunes signing off. See you in the next one.